Okay, let's dive right into this because the story of Malaysia is, frankly, one of the absolute most fascinating economic narratives of our modern era. Think about it. In just the past 2 decades, this nation has completely transformed itself from a relatively unremarkable agrarian economy into a highly diversified middle-income success story. But what makes Malaysia stand out isn't just that it grew, it's exactly how it grew. You see, they don't have the massive billion-plus population of a China or an India, and they certainly aren't floating on an endless ocean of oil. Instead, they've leveraged very specific, highly unique advantages to build their wealth. In this explainer, we're going to unpack the ingenious strategies that built Malaysia, the hidden risks that are currently threatening to tear it down, and the incredibly ambitious reboot they're attempting right now.
Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, the Asian success story. 2. Geography and purchasing power. 3. The innovation stumbling block. 4. Inequality and corruption. 5. The semiconductor solution. And finally, number 6, the final economic score.
Section 1. The Asian success story. Let's look at exactly how they laid the groundwork for all this modern prosperity.
If we walk through their historical evolution, you can see the very deliberate steps Malaysia took. Before independence, back when it was British Malaya, it was essentially just a commodity supplier for the empire, primarily pumping out tin, rubber, and palm oil. But the real game-changing pivot happens in the 1970s with their new economic policy. They realized pretty quickly that they needed to industrialize, and their smartest move was simply looking outward. They actively studied nearby institutional successes, the famous Asian tigers like Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea, and Taiwan. They set up free trade zones in cities like Penang and aggressively courted foreign direct investment, or FDI. We're talking partnerships with massive Japanese giants like Mitsubishi, Toyota, Sony, and Hitachi. They didn't try to reinvent the wheel here. They borrowed a proven blueprint and built a massive, highly efficient, export-driven manufacturing base.
But here is the real secret sauce. Malaysia didn't just hoard the cash they made from all these exports. Instead, they aggressively reinvested it right back into the physical and digital backbone of their country. Today, Malaysia boasts some of the absolute best roads, ports, and internet connectivity in all of Asia. In fact, if you look at the data, citizen satisfaction with this infrastructure actually surpasses that of many much wealthier Western nations by a really significant margin. They basically built a world-class system entirely designed to accommodate even more industry.
Section 2, Geography and Purchasing Power. Because, as we know, infrastructure is only half the battle. The other half is location. And wow, did Malaysia hit the geographic jackpot. A staggering 25% of the entire world's trade passes through the Strait of Malacca, which Malaysia sits perfectly right alongside. It connects the Indian Ocean directly to the South China Sea. This makes it a critical global choke point for energy and food, meaning even massive superpowers rely heavily on this route. Furthermore, Malaysia's time zone allows it to seamlessly share labor windows with key Asian partners like China and Singapore, while simultaneously catching the middle of the business day in parts of the US and Europe. It is, quite literally, a spatial and temporal goldmine.
Which brings us to a crucial economic concept, purchasing power parity, or PPP. Originally introduced by economist Gustav Cassel way back after World War I, PPP compares different currencies through a standard basket of goods. So it doesn't just look at flat exchange rates, it looks at what your money actually buys you on the ground in a specific country. And honestly, understanding this metric is the absolute key to understanding Malaysia's true global appeal.
And this brilliantly illustrates why PPP matters so much in the real world. Think about it. A $50,000 income in the USA right now, well, depending on the city, that involves making some fairly significant lifestyle sacrifices. But that exact same $50,000 in Malaysia, it affords a highly comfortable home, exceptional medical care, reliable transport, and plenty of entertainment for a whole family. Malaysia basically offers the low cost of living you might expect to find in a developing nation, but it pairs it beautifully with the modern amenities and infrastructure of a fully developed one. This combination makes it an incredibly attractive hub for foreign businesses, expats, and remote workers who are bringing outside wealth directly into the local economy.
Section 3. The Innovation Stumbling Block. Because, of course, no economic rise is ever completely flawless, right? Let's look at the cracks that are starting to form. This is the multi-billion-dollar question that is currently haunting Malaysian economists. After such an impressive, multi-decade run to lower middle-income status, growth is showing very real signs of stalling out. Why? Well, because the very strategy that fueled their meteoric rise has inadvertently created a really dangerous ceiling.
So the crucial point to understand here is this. Malaysia became overly reliant on all that foreign direct investment. For decades, they leaned heavily on external companies like Hitachi or Intel to bring the innovation to them. Malaysia supplied the highly capable, low-cost labor and the factories, while the outsiders supplied the ideas and the tech. But what happens when those outside partners suddenly slow down their own innovation? Well, Malaysia suffers. Government officials are already actively noting that a deeper-than-expected global technology down cycle is hurting them. Because Malaysia hasn't heavily funded its own internal research and development, they're highly vulnerable to just being left behind with a bunch of obsolete manufacturing hubs.
Section 4. Inequality and corruption. These economic vulnerabilities are further complicated by some pretty significant structural risks under the surface.
Decades ago, Malaysia implemented policies with noble intentions, establishing specific quotas for education and business ownership to ensure that all ethnic groups were actually participating in the economic boom. And while this definitely helped avoid cultural tensions initially, critics now argue that prolonging these policies has led to a sort of reverse discrimination. This disparity is sharply visible geographically, too. Peninsula Malaysia holds the major cities, the massive wealth, and the prime opportunities. Meanwhile, East Malaysia remains much more rural, culturally diverse, and frankly faces a very real risk of being completely left behind. If this regional inequality isn't carefully and actively managed, it could lead to severe public unrest down the line.
And then we have to talk about the issue of institutional trust. An estimated $4 billion was lost to the 1MDB scandal. Back in the early 2000s, a sovereign wealth fund specifically designed to help develop the nation was allegedly pillaged through complex shell companies to fund lavish parties and global elite lifestyles, even indirectly funding Hollywood movies, believe it or not. Beyond the sheer, staggering financial loss, scandals exactly like this severely damage public trust. And to successfully transition from a middle-income economy to a fully advanced one, a nation fundamentally requires a high-trust society where investors and everyday citizens completely believe in their institutions.
Section 5, the semiconductor solution. Now, fortunately, it is not all doom and gloom. Malaysia is actually executing a massive strategic pivot to secure their future. Enter the New Industrial Master Plan, or NIMP 2030. This is Malaysia's official roadmap out of the middle-income trap, and they are pivoting hard. Instead of just being an assembly line for other countries, they want to significantly enhance their economic complexity by focusing squarely on high-tech industries. They're pouring serious money into STEM education right now to train tens of thousands of their own homegrown engineers to meet future demand. They are heavily pushing for domestic innovation through R&D and Industry 4.0 initiatives. Simply put, they want to be the creators of tomorrow, not just the assemblers of today.
Now, what's truly fascinating is how far along they already are in this high-tech pivot. Did you know Malaysia currently accounts for a staggering 13% of all worldwide testing and packaging for semiconductors? In a global economy that is literally entirely reliant on microchips, Malaysia has already secured a deeply lucrative and incredibly critical position in the supply chain, working closely alongside massive, highly technical operators like Intel and Infineon. This is exactly the kind of high-value industry that will pull their wages up and forcefully drive their economy forward.
Section 6, the final economic score. Taking absolutely everything we've just covered into account, where does Malaysia truly stand? Let's tally up the final scorecard.
Let's break this down metric by metric. For size, they earn a very solid 7 out of 10. With a GDP sitting at $488 billion, they are a major regional player, trailing just slightly behind neighbors like Thailand and Vietnam. For GDP per capita, they get a 5 out of 10. They've crept just ahead of the global average of roughly $14,000 per person, putting them squarely in the middle of the pack. For stability, we give them a 6 out of 10. I mean, multinational companies trust them enough to invest billions, absolutely, but those open corruption issues we discussed definitely keep this score from being any higher. Growth, however, gets a massive 9 out of 10, as the economy has roughly doubled in size over the last decade, which is just an incredible feat for a middle-income nation. And finally, exports earn a 7 out of 10, primarily driven by that robust, highly value-adding integrated circuit and semiconductor industry.
You average all those metrics together, and Malaysia earns a final score of 6.8 out of 10. This places them in a highly respectable, really solid position on the global economic stage. They are a formidable power, undoubtedly, but they are also one with very clear areas requiring serious improvement if they ever want to reach that coveted top tier.
Ultimately, what we have to remember here is that regional competition in Asia isn't just some zero-sum game. Malaysia works incredibly closely with its neighbors, trading palm oil and tech with Vietnam, sharing huge economic zones with Singapore. The primary threat here isn't really that another country is going to come in and steal their success. As the source material puts it perfectly, the only thing standing between Malaysia and lasting economic prosperity is Malaysia itself. At the end of the day, it all comes down to their own internal reforms.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to ponder. They absolutely have the geography, they have the world-class infrastructure, and they certainly have the ambition. But will they successfully navigate their internal disparities and fully commit to domestic innovation to break that middle-income ceiling? Or will an over-reliance on past strategies ultimately hold them back? It's going to be a fascinating journey to watch unfold over the next decade. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I really hope you found it as illuminating as I did. Keep learning, and I'll see you on the next one.